So you have an interesting relationship in the movie, as I understand it. Can you talk a little bit about who you are to each other in the film?
Well, yeah, I think we're opposites with a lot of similar issues to overcome. You know, Moran's character is a poor gypsy woman living in Italy, so she's an outsider in that sense. I play an American businessman who is somewhat disinterested in cultural aspects of traveling abroad. He'd prefer to have a burger and a beer. And I think what my character is pretty much reeling from some mistakes he's made in his life, and I think that's weighing on his shoulders. And Moran's character has a vivaciousness and she's a very attractive woman, and he sees her in a bar, and
you can keep with that, yeah. Keep on going.
And there's a fascination, I think, and my character's very intrigued by her, and then she sort of reels him into an elaborate con, which he perhaps is somewhat aware of and is willing to go down that road because maybe the excitement that she brings and the unpredictability, and also perhaps a degree of belief in helping her anyway. It's hard to know what the truth is. So ultimately it's about the complexity of relationships and love and what is really going on and what isn't.
And maybe in other words, she's kind of like an electric shock. I mean, physically, she attacks him. Emotionally, she attacks him. And pushes him to be different. Because he's been numbed for a while. I mean, I feel like we've been in so many stages of our lives that we don't really want to feel anything because that might just hurt us. And he's in that state. And here's this woman that can't trust anybody, especially not men, and she has a really good reason not to. And they feed each other's needs. He needs this force of life back, and she needs his kindness and belief. Because who would believe a liar? She doesn't even believe herself. She's just caught up in these lies that she keeps telling, and it's the only way that she can survive with. And I think that gypsy or not, we all experience that in a way. Like, we just keep telling ourselves certain lies. Maybe they're not so blunt and we're conscious of them, but we deny what really is truly happening deep down here. And this is what this movie is about, exploring and provoking your most and very well kept demons. And that's why I think it's so visceral and arrives to so many people.
Along those same lines, Paul Haggis is so good at focusing in on, personal relationships so that you feel it's relevant, but then weaving them in those different narratives. So what do you think the theme of the film is with these relationships that are being examined, with all of them?
Wow, there's a lot of themes in this movie, and that's why it's so complex and beautiful. I think there's some very, the initial questions that kind of initiated this whole script was, how do we people that are in some way successful in certain fields are not successful in their relationships? What is this thing that keeps us from surrendering to love? And we all have a different type of demons, and probably more than one. And that's what kind of like started it off. And then in our storyline, which I think is so beautiful and poetic, is like, how do you believe a person that you really do not need to believe in? I mean, he's a liar, but this is the only way that that person can actually change. And even if in our own lives, if your mother would always tell you that you can do it, anything you could do, if you want to do this, you have the ability to do that, that child will grow up doing that. And the opposite will probably turn to an opposite reaction. And that's what's so beautiful about this love story. He believes despite what he sees, despite the lie that is sitting right in front of him.
You think it's something that we do commonly in our own lives?
Well, maybe not to the extent that these characters are experiencing life, but yeah, I mean, I think almost anybody who's lived can relate to some degree of what these characters are experiencing. And, you know, what attracted me to doing this, aside from, you know, Paul writing a really beautiful script and the complexity of the nature of the storytelling approach, is the frailty and the flaws of the characters. And that's the common denominator, is that they're all deeply flawed, and we all are. And I think it's a responsibility in making movies to portray human beings just as that, you know, not to, you know, whitewash the complexity of our personalities and the flaws, and to actually highlight them, because that's the most interesting.
Your relationship takes place in Italy, but then there's New York and Paris and these sort of romantic settings.
Yeah.
How did that actually, sort of those environments, play into, you know, the feeling or the mood on set and what the film is?
It's magic. It's a magical thing to shoot in a place like Italy and Paris, for that matter. And even New York. I mean, and I've had the privilege of working in those places. I've also worked in much more sterile environments, or, you know, so there is an energy thing that is unexplainable. And I also think there's something beautiful in the visual storytelling approach, and being in a place that has a lot of natural beauty or history, or even the faces of the people there that are so unique. I mean, we shot in Rome, but a portion of our storyline takes place in Taranto, which is a steel, former steel mining town, or major production of you know, manufacturing town, and it's a hard place to live, and the people who live there were so like
Passionate.
generous to let us in, but they had lived, and they had experienced a lot of hardships, and you know, it was fascinating. And there is potential for danger around there for a character who's on his own, like my character, and so that adds a degree of truth for me to play with, and all that stuff is wonderful.
All I'm thinking about was food and how you can, after a very emotional and perhaps revealing scene, you can then just like get your pasta and be like, oh, look how life is so beautiful in this country. And then you can appreciate a tomato and a great glass of wine, and they look at the tomato, Italians are like, guarda sto pomodoro, guarda sto pomodoro. And you really feel so privileged to be reminded with the simple beauty of life. And I think that really helped us to just be even more romantic and appreciate his hand. I mean, what's beautiful also about the story, and I'm talking from the romantic point of view perhaps, is she discovers a completely different human being, that she'd never seen these types of hands and never heard that type of voice and this tender gestures that he has towards her. And for a woman that is just like a cat on the street, just trying to survive, and she will take advantage before she will be taken advantage of, to see that kindness in that surrounding is just kind of like living within she was living in a movie. And I mean, Italians, I mean, I love them. They're just so great and funny. And one of the funniest moments in the movie is just this kind of force of life of Italians. And yesterday, I don't think people understood what they were saying, and they were just cracking up for literally 7 minutes. And I'm like, okay, this was not supposed to be fun, and it's funny and funny. And that's the sense of life that you have in that particular place that is really brought to life. And also, I have to say to Paul that he did a really good job not telling the story in postcards. That, you know, some people would, he found a really unique alley of the country and followed that and took us both on a ride and the viewers. So that was really a beautiful achievement that he kind of come across with.
That's great. Thank you. I think
Thank
our
you.
time is